But Jeff, what if the conflict caused by raising the issue destroys the marriage? This is probably the number one reason people don't bring up issues in marriage. We're naturally conflict averse. We don't like conflict. Nobody gets up and says, you know what I would like to have today? A painful and awkward conversation with the people I live with. That would be great. I'd love to do that. I'm just looking for a chance to do that. Conflict is inherently risky and it's unpredictable. So we generally do our best to avoid it. And if we succumb to the fear, it puts us in a lose-lose situation where we don't raise issues in our marriage because we're scared that if we do, it's going to result in conflict that could destroy our marriage. But failing to address those issues will only result in them later manifesting in a catastrophic way. So what's the solution? Is your marriage doomed either way? Well, not necessarily. When we get married, we take vows. And on our wedding day, those vows are romantic and sweet, and we make them gladly because we have no idea what we're saying. We think that we're always going to be as in love with our spouse as we are at that moment. It's really sweet looking back how delusional we are when we get married, isn't it? It's beautiful. It's very sweet. The reason people came up with marriage vows in front of witnesses was because some people who had been married for a while realized that life is going to throw some serious curveballs at most marriages. Sickness, money problems, dark days, tough seasons, loss and tragedy, things that would make most people want to give up. But the idea was that all those witnesses would be able to say during those times, but you made those vows. I was there. I heard you say them. You made those promises to each other. That's the idea behind marriage vows. People who'd been married a while knew the reality that there would be times in every marriage when only the seriousness of those vows would hold the marriage together. People with enough integrity to not break their word. And that sort of approach is still needed today, and I'll tell you why. A good marriage needs to have big borders. A good marriage needs to have big borders. Let me explain. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. Those classic marriage vows leave a lot of room for some seriously bad stuff to happen. Seriously bad stuff. And the borders of your marriage define how bad things can get before you quit. They define how much room there is in your marriage for difficult times. When you have a serious commitment to your marriage is going to have big borders. That means that sometimes you and your spouse might be parked at opposite ends of the ranch, as far away from each other as you can possibly be, but you're still on the same ranch. You're still within the same borders. Here's where I'm going with this. When your marriage has big borders, you'll have room for conflict. When your marriage has big borders, you will have the room for conflict. But when your marriage doesn't have a high level of commitment, you're going to create small borders for your marriage, which means neither of you has to wander very, very far before you're off the ranch. And that creates an atmosphere of fear and insecurity that makes both spouses afraid to raise real issues because you got small borders. If raising serious issues, really get this, if raising serious issues risks the entire marriage, most people won't do it. They won't do it. They'll push those issues to the side until they become unbearable and irreparable. So how big are the borders of your marriage? How much room is there in your marriage for conflict? Is there enough room in your marriage for your spouse to raise serious issues that might take a while to work through? Is there enough room for you to raise serious issues? If you don't feel like there is, that's probably the most important conversation you could have with your spouse this week. You need to let them know that you are afraid to raise real issues because you're scared that it's going to wreck the marriage, that they're going to leave. You need to let them know if that's where you are. Don't tap your partner right now. Everyone's going to see. It's going to be very awkward, okay? So when a marriage has big borders, both spouses know that even when everything hits the fan, the other person isn't going anywhere. And that creates a level of security and trust in a marriage that makes it possible for difficult issues to be raised. And I'm not saying that it makes raising difficult issues easy or not awkward somehow. I'm just saying that in a good marriage, raising issues doesn't mean also raising the issue of divorce. If you can't raise a serious issue in your marriage without divorce coming up, you got a serious problem. You've got small borders. And there are issues that aren't being addressed because you're both scared to bring them up.